My name is Francis Johnson. My traditional name is Esk'etemc. I am one of 3 hereditary chiefs from the community of Esk'et. For me, I always look at it from the family perspective first. I look at how it's affected, truth and reconciliation has affected my family. So I look at, okay, how have I healed from the residential school and colonization, and my family has done the work together with my dad and mom. So I look at it, I'm the 2nd generation that's raising their kids. So my dad and mom had to learn to raise me, and how am I changing my life for my family? So that's the biggest thing I look at for how it affects me and my family. And then I look at the whole total to see if how it affects our community and how it affects First Nations people. So that's the view I take of reconciliation. So I can work on it personally. I can forgive the church. I can forgive what's happened to me through the intergenerational trauma. But there are things that the community. And when I say community, I mean community as a whole. Our neighbors are from other nations, have to understand where we come from and how the residential school and truth and reconciliation affects us as a community. And really that's the biggest thing, is we just want the truth to be known, what happened, and so people can understand our path and our journey. Because I think that's the biggest thing that I want to see, is that everybody knows the truth of what happened to us. So, and then you start looking at the bigger picture. What roles did the government have for colonization, and what they had for residential school in trying to remove the Indian from the child, kind of thing. And then we're going into the bigger picture. So. Yeah, those are kind of the way that I look at it, is, how does it affect my family? How does it affect my community? And how does it affect us as a nation? I think the biggest thing is, how is the community moving out of poverty? For our community, we're 60% unemployment here. And we've been living like that since the Indian Act was enacted here. So, how do we change that first? We're governed almost like a socialist regime under the Indian Act. The band controls housing, the economy, everything on reserve, and the band is controlled by the federal government. So, those are the things that kind of I look at first, is, how can we change things in our community, and how does reconciliation affect our community, and what resolutions can the government work with us on resolving that? I think one of the first things is we need restitution with the land. I mean, the biggest thing is we need to be able to benefit economically from our lands. I mean, that's the biggest thing of any type of government, before you can look at other things, to be more independence and to be sovereign, with food sovereign and the way we govern ourselves, we need to have a land base. Well, I think, the Indian Act was part of that, to separate the people from the land. We're put on the reserve to vacate the land so that settlers could come in and preempt our lands. I think as a hereditary chief, we're moving back to our traditional governance, because we want to have something separate from the Indian Act, back to where we governed ourselves prior to contact. And we're a complex society that had to have a complex governance. So, going back to our governance would help us decolonize and help bringing back our ceremonies, help bringing back our feasting, our naming ceremonies, our language. So that's one positive step towards, moving back and decolonizing our community. I think that as a hereditary chief, I'm the middleman between almost the moderator with the families. There's 22 families in the community, and I also communicate with those families and the traditional headmen, or the people that are looking after the fishing, the hunting, our spiritual chiefs and our leaders. And I'm also working with our clan of elders that are making higher decisions and provide almost like a board of directors to the hereditary chiefs, and giving us some higher level guidance when required, or helping us to get through hard to deal with issues. I think traditionally our women were the knowledge keepers of our nation. They had gifts that could see skill sets in our kids when they're growing up. Also traditionally, as women often outlived the men, so very early on, like a lot of the knowledge was passed on from the women to the children. So I think they hold a special, authority in our nation for, providing a balance between, the men leading, but also having the women with their perspectives in making decisions on the land. Back in 2016, the community here voted 80% to get out a treaty, for one, but also one of the referendum questions was, how would you want to govern yourself? So 80% said that they wanted some form of traditional governance. The current chief at the time, Charlene, wasn't convinced that treaty was the way to go. And so there was a referendum question that was asked to the people, do we stay in treaty? And 80% of the people said, no, we're going to get out of treaty. Okay, so then the second part of the question was, how would we govern ourselves going forward? There were questions with, do we stay under the Indian Act, or do we move towards traditional governance? And 80% of the people said they wanted some form of traditional governance. I think for me, there definitely has to be education within the society in general, and we've seen that over the last year and a couple of years with the knowledge and of what happened to First Nations people in reserves. I think that's been key in getting people to understand what we went through and how colonization has affected us. And I think the first thing is just education. So I think moving forward, we need to have leaders that will really want to see a resolution to the issues and what First Nations people want. And because I think, if you ask different people, I think, a lot of people want some type of restitution with returning to the land, but also, they want a say in how we're being managed and governed. I think Esk'etemc is in a unique position. We have a form of traditional governance, but we also have our chief and council, and we're starting to work together on certain things. So I think working together with our traditional governance, the family groups are involved, so all the family heads would have a seat on the table to be able to help with the resolution. And I think that's the key thing, because, under the INAC system where it's a chief and council, that's fine, but I think the process would have to include more of the community, in my mind. I think, to me, we have to share a vision first, because, my vision of reconciliation is different, because I don't know if I'm not sure if I agree with the word reconciliation, because you can still have reconciliation continuing on with your colonization views of society in general. So, I like words of resolving different issues, and how do we work towards that together is kind of what I would like to see, because reconciliation is a word that it can be taken out of context, and it can be changed to mean different things. So like a common vision of reconciliation has to be put forward or worked on jointly by First Nations and government. Reconciliation would require restitution, like returning lands to the people. Like I said, it'll be a key part of our governance, but also a key part of our economy moving forward. So I think that is the key issue that has always been on the plate, is like who owns the land has to be identified. BC doesn't have any treaties. Our people had treaties with the Queen before even we were part of Canada. So I think those things that's the key issue that has to be resolved before real restitution can happen, in my mind, or reconciliation is the word of the day. You don't have to wait for an apology from the church or the government to move your family forward in resolving the intergenerational trauma or breaking the cycles in your family. You can do it yourself, and you can forgive yourself and build up your families. I mean, that's a form of decolonizing. I think non-First Nations can be just educated on what happened, to First Nations people and how the government wanted to disconnect our people from our lands, to vacate them, and also to colonize us to become part of society. That's all we want. We just want to be heard, and I think everybody in Canada has a right to know what happened. It's been tough for the last year with COVID, just to meet regularly. Like, our governance was moving along quite well, and I felt like, the COVID just put a stop to a lot of our communication. So a lot of our communication happened with meetings and some videos and, things like that. So, yeah, I'm finding like, I guess, weaknesses of our governance in today's standard is a lot of it before was face-to-face, but we have to adapt and, be able to do things through video more, or putting out information through newsletters or things like that. So, yeah, it was quite a learning thing in the last year. Yeah. No, I think we were, well, it's not true. Like, our neighbors, we're all related to our neighbors, and so we've lost, friends and family and leaders within our nation. So, yeah, it's definitely impacted, our people here.